Hello world, and we are back. My name is Kyle Fischl. This is going to be episode 182 of my poker vlog. For this one, I play a 2-5 session at the Sarasota Poker Room, One-Eyed Jacks. Have a ton of interesting hands to go over, so we're going to get right into it. First hand of note. We started at the 1-2 table. We wait for the 2-5 to open up. I'm looking in the small blind at pocket jacks, and with two limps, we're definitely going to raise this one up. I choose $12. Could go 15 or maybe even 18 if you wanted to. All seem like reasonable sizes. For $12, the big blind and the cutoff decide to call. So we're going three ways to ace, 8, 9 with two spades. Seems like a good board to c-bet. I have best aces in range. The jack has a little bit of connectivity with some running straight cards. And additionally, not having a spade means I can get called by, spade draws that I'm ahead of. So I choose to bet $15. And to this bet, only the cutoff decides to call. So now we're heads up to a turn card, which is the King of Hearts. Doesn't give me any backdoor equity, but if my opponent has pocket tens, small pocket pairs, a random 9, some weak aces, they all might fold to a second barrel, so I decided to fire again. I bet $25. Additionally, I like this bet because all the draws are still available. My opponent had 6-7, 10 jack, 2 spades, all those might call and are behind, and for $25 my opponent makes the call again. Now the river is the King of Spades. Most of my plans on this hand are over, except I do now think that it's possible my opponent has an ace. Wondering if the board pairing king and spade completing card is enough to get my opponent to fold one of these aces. Think for a little bit, but eventually decide better of it. Just check, take my showdown value. Think that this opponent is not really going to fold all too often. He checks it back and has ace 10 of hearts. So yeah, if you're going to limp call ace 10 of hearts, you're probably not folding on ace high boards. So we lose a hand at 1-2. One more fun hand at the smaller table. I look down at ace king offsuit from the low jack. In this one, there's a button straddle, 2 players limp. The +1 player raises to $15. We are 3-betting this one because it's ace king. If everyone folds, we pick up $30 uncontested. Otherwise, we can play a decent sized pot in relative position. So I make it $45. And the player to my left thinks for a little bit, then calls the 45. Okay. Wasn't really expecting too many cold calls of a 3-bet. Button folds, and now the small blind is all in for $300.
Boy, that escalated quickly. I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
It jumped up a notch.
It did, didn't it?
Now, under the gun limp jams was literally the topic of my last video. Part of me thinks that this opponent just watched and is trying to make a move and make the video, level me into folding. A lot of those thoughts are going through my head. Additionally, this hand happened before the previous video was released, so you couldn't have actually seen it. I would be lying if I said that the video production and my previous thoughts on limp jamming wasn't going through my head at this exact moment. But in general, I think we need to disregard all that stuff and just play the hand with the information we have. Don't make it too complicated. Don't put extraneous factors into it. So if we took everything out of this opponent limped from the small blind, which is technically the undergun position, and after facing a raise, a 3-bet, and a 3-bet cold caller, he's going to jam. That seems very, very, very strong in my opinion. Not even queens or kings. It feels like just straight aces. How could you have a smaller pocket pair and think that you can jam 300 into a 3-better and a 3-bet cold caller? So thinking bluffs in this scenario are nearly impossible because they don't have to just worry about me, they have to worry about the other player too. Seems crazy. So I think this opponent just has aces or kings, and I'm drawing very, very thin. I think queens can just raise regularly. I don't think they need to limp jam. And then jacks 10 seem pretty unnecessary. Seems like a better spot to just call. So I make a very reluctant fold. Really going back and forth with this one, leveling myself. But I think that I'm just not good here. And the player to my left calls, so I get to see a run out, which comes ace high with 2 spades. So when I see the ace, I'm pretty confident I'd have the best hand at this point. The player to my left has ace king suited as well. And the small blind shows pocket 9s. So maybe I don't know what a limp jam actually is. But on the other hand, I think jam with 9s is not very good, and you get called by ace king a lot of the time, and then you lose. So not the best plan in my opinion. Luckily, I do win a small pot at 1-2 before we're called to the bigger game. We are now into the game for $1,000. Had to top off a bit add-on before we play at the 2-5 table. We win a pretty big PLO double board bomb pot, which does not make the best vlog content because there's no real analysis to it. Before we get to our first real hand at the 2-5 table. This time we have ace-king again in the cutoff. When it folds all the way to me, I raise to $20. The small blind and the big blind decide to continue. Seems pretty good for me. Flop is ace-queen 3 rainbow. When both players check to me, I think I'm either way ahead or way behind, so not really thinking I need to protect against anything. Think it's fine to give my opponents a free card. Think it's fine to go for 2 streets with this hand. I think 3 streets is a little bit greedy, and at a nitty table, it's hard to get paid off worse, so I choose the free street to be the flop.
Are you like a crazy person?
I'm quite sure they will say so.
When the turn is the 7 of spades, the small blind bets $40. And then the big blind calls. Now I think we can go either way with it. I think we can raise, I think we can call. Yes, backdoor spades got there, but I think these opponents might be betting and even calling with any ace, any queen, and then like jack 10, king 10. Just a lot of hands that are really sub 20% equity, just very little chance of winning. So I think we can just call now and either raise river or bet ourselves when checked to. So I choose just call. Yes, very passive line with this ace king. Sometimes we have to have some stronger hands in our check calling range. And on the river, 3 of hearts. Both players check to me. Now we get to go for some pure value. It's almost certain we have the best hand. We get to bet $125 with a very disguised strong value hand. And for $125, the small blind thinks for a little bit and then calls. Big blind folds, I show my hand, and it's good. So we get a ton of value on this hand. Played a somewhat unconventional way, but sometimes you have to mix it up to remain unpredictable. Now this deck's looking pretty good, in for only 1,000. Kind of like the height on this. Please take a moment and subscribe. Win another less notable pot before. I am under the gun. I have pocket 4s. I raise to $15. One late position player calls, a second one calls, and then both blinds decide to call. So we end up going 5 ways to a flop of 7-5 deuce with 2 hearts. Not a bad board for pocket 4s. It doesn't connect to my under the gun opening range all too often, but it shouldn't really connect to any other players very hard as well. So I'm kind of surprised when I see the small blind lead out for 30. When it folds to me, I'm going to raise here. I have all the overpairs in range. 8s plus probably raise here. Ace-X of hearts could raise here. Maybe ace 3, ace 4 for some gutters and some overs. All these seem like decent hands I would bluff with, so I'm going to throw 4s in there as well. Has some playability if I turn a 3, an ace, a 6. All those would be pretty good developments. $80 is my raise. Gets the other 2 players out of the way, and we're back to the small blind, who does not take too long before calling. Alright, hopefully he's on a heart draw and we're actually ahead. The turn is the queen of diamonds. I was actually going to throw out a second barrel this one if I'm raising the flop with an overpair or a heart draw. Sometimes I have ace queen of hearts. Sometimes my overpair is still an overpair. But I don't really get the chance when my opponent just leads for 125. Now I'm guessing he's the small blind. Maybe he has 7-5 specifically. Very surprised to see this lead 2 times into an aggressor, but having both the 4 of hearts and diamonds specifically feels pretty bad. Don't think that he has a draw pretty much ever. And 4s, he can't have 3-4 or 6-4, so guess he just has a strong hand, and we're going to let this one go. But kind of an interesting one, I would say. We win a less interesting one before the next hand of note. I have 8-9 of diamonds on the button. With 1 limp, the cutoff raises to 30. I choose to just call with suited connectors. Think that they play fine post flop. Would love to see a flop. Not afraid about it being multi-way. And I love my position, so call seems to be the right answer. The big blind and the limper decide to call as well. So we end up going 4 ways to a flop, which comes king 8-4 rainbow with 1 diamond. Never really folding on this flop. When it checks to the pre-flop aggressor, who is the cutoff, he checks. Okay, that seems pretty good for me. I think I could bet here to thin the field. If I had a random king, I'd bet small, so an 8's going to be the same story. Hopefully most of these opponents just missed. Get a hand like jack 10, ace 5. Just a bunch of random hands to fold. We love to clear out all that equity. So I bet $45. The big blind and the limper fold, but the cutoff decides to call. Okay, hoping for a diamond turn card, but we get the deuce of hearts. The cutoff checks to me a second time, and this opponent is very GTO, very optimal. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that as this means I get to double barrel with second pair a lot, because he would check call with like ace queen, ace jack, ace 10, a lot of ace x and queen x over cards that have backdoor straight draw, backdoor flush draw. We'll call the flop, and we want to put a lot of more pressure on those hands on this turn card.
What say you, Corey? Ma. Wait.
So the double barrel this time will be for $85. This second barrel seems to do the trick. My opponent folds. So a pair of eights was almost definitely the best hand. He would not have folded a king here. So we're happy we took it down and got my opponent to fold whatever equity he did have. Following that, I looked down at 10-9 of hearts from the hijack. With one limp, I raised to $20. The button, the big blind, and the limper call. So we end up going 4 ways to a flop, which comes 10-7-3 rainbow with one heart. Top pair, backdoor straight draw, backdoor flush draw, definitely above average for this hand. But today might be just the day of leading because the big blind decides to lead for $30. Similar to my fours hand, I have top pair now. I think leads in general are often draws trying to name their own price. Trying to charge 8-9, 5-6, 4-5, worse 10s and very good 7s. I'm going to raise this one up. I make it $90. I think this puts a lot of my opponent's hands in a very tough spot. And maybe he did just have a draw trying to name his own price because he folds pretty quickly. We take this one down. Top pair was likely good. Glad we chose the aggressive route on this one. Next interesting hand. I have ace king in the big blind with 2 limps. I'm definitely going to raise this one up. I make it $25. Both limpers decide to call, so we end up going 3 ways to a flop of king, queen, 6, 2 diamonds.
Hell yeah! Hey, come on, baby! Come on! Yes! Come on! Ah! Yes!
Well, out of position, I think that I'm not going to bet this one into 2 people. I like starting off with a check when I flop top pair into a multi-way pot. This hand can happily check call down, and being out of position adds another factor where we would like to pot control. When I check, the first limper checks and the second limper checks. Alright, 3 ways to a turn card, which is an 8. Okay, doesn't complete the diamonds, doesn't complete any real 2 pairs. Really a brick. So we're going to bet small here. Since no one bet flop, they likely don't have a king, they likely don't have a queen. Even some diamond draws would have picked up the betting lead when it's open, so we're not even too worried about flushes at this point. $30 is the bet. And one later player decides to call. So now we're heads up to a river card, which is a 6. Well, that's good, I guess. If my opponent somehow has queen 8, we beat that one. But besides that, we really have to bet small here. Trying to target just a queen, maybe just an 8. Don't know what can really call me at all. So I bet $75. Around half pot on the river. Milky kind of. And maybe it'll be enough to entice someone who has a big stack. They can definitely afford the 75. But they choose not to on this one. They let it go, and we win another pot. And that leads us to the final hand of note. So I have ace jack of diamonds in middle position. With one limp, I raise to $25. The cutoff and the button decide to call. The limper folds, so we end up going 3 ways to a flop. This one is also giving me top pair. Ace 8 4 rainbow. And because we're not always just going to check when we have top pair, we are going to mix it up at a relatively correct frequency. We're going to bet small this time. We have a pair of aces, ABC poker. This one is a bet. And for the $25, both players fold. Pretty standard, but we happily take standard. We take the win. We win another small, less noble pot before we decide that we have enough content for a video, have a decent win. We are into the game for $1,000. Out of the game for $1,580, which is a profit of $580 across 2 hours. Equates to $290 an hour or 50 big blinds an hour. Yeah, today went pretty good. Haven't played a 2-5 session at Sarasota in a while. Sticking to the 1-3 deep game and sometimes just the 1-3 game, getting some more relatable stakes for everyone. But we were back at the bigger table today. Happy that I didn't really have too many difficult decisions. Everything was pretty simple, pretty straightforward. But one note I would like to add to the video that I don't think translates very well. is we only really add the interesting hands to the video. So like the final hand where I had ace jack and I just bet and everyone folds, those are typically the ones that I just have a clip saying I win a small, less notable pot, and I just show the chips being pushed. I say that because sometimes the videos can convey an image of me just always checking top pair, but that's not really the reality of it. The reality of it is the hands that are more standard, I don't really find too interesting, and therefore they don't make the video all too often. What is interesting is taking one of your top pairs and adding it to your strong checking range, which you need to do at the correct frequency in order to play in a way that does not make it easy on your opponents to be able to play perfectly against you. And sometimes that means that the hands that make the video are mainly the ones where we take the passive, less standard lines. But threw the ace jack in there at the end to show you, oh, I just have top pair, I bet, everyone folds. Sometimes I bet, get one call, turn, bet, get a fold, and not super interesting, but those hands happen a lot throughout a session. Also hands where you just, play king, queen, the board is a whiff, and you just check fold. Those happen too sometimes. Not quite vlog worthy, but definitely hands that happen. It's not always just flopping gin and having everything be perfect. But if you made all the way to this point and watched my entire rant, please do me a favor, hit the like button so I know that my lessons at the end are being heard by someone. I appreciate every viewer that tunes into my channel. I appreciate it a ton, and I will see you on the next one.